Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from, but it's great to connect with all of you, and I want to get right to the question on the screen. How can we transform our results by developing a cohesive theory of the customer? I'm smiling at Dan. Paul is not with us today. Dan Burstein, who oversees all of our editorial content and senior marketing leader, is right here with me, and you may be hearing from him. I'll be talking to him off camera as he supports us during all the work right now. Paul is on vacation. And if you'd like, I'll tell you exactly where he's staying. That way you can call him at all hours of the day and ask him questions about your marketing, and I'm sure he'll appreciate that. In the meantime, I have taught on customer theory before. Many of you are asking me about how do I get that piece that you taught before, and we had a technical issue, so I'm going to be touching that content again, but in a very different way. In one moment, I'm going to ask you a question about this test. If you're just tuning in, keep an eye on that. You've seen this test before because, again, I'm going back to create a recording for you for a missing piece of our approach. However, I've got something more interesting I want to share right at the start. Cliff, shift me to the infographic. Now, for the last 3 weeks, I've been teaching on the 21 psychological elements of page design. And we created an infographic that ties all the content together. I want to shift to the infographic right now and show you a new infographic that I'm going to be teaching from that will help you think about the Holy Grail in marketing. Now, this graphic, let's, Dan, move it around or shrink it, give them a chance to get a sense of it, but it follows a series of steps. Do you see this? And you can download this. It's a wall poster. You can use it to think about your marketing. That's it. Let's keep it at that particular piece. So if you're just joining us, everything I talk about today is going to unpack those 5 steps. But to set you up for that, I want to show you a page. Many of you have seen this page. If you're new, you haven't, take a look at it. I want you to see the original page right there and ask yourself, all right, how is this approach different from the approach I'm going to put in front of you right now? Now, I want you to see that this is the content, this is the original control, and now you're looking at a new page, and it has a different approach. More importantly, it has a different way of thinking. More precisely, it has a different hypothesis. And as I cash in the hypotheses, you're going to start to understand something critical in marketing. But for a moment, just take a look at this page, the original, and say, what would you do to improve its performance? And while you think about that, if you are experienced in terms of my teaching, we're going to still take you into new territory today, but we're going to tie it to a subject that you hear me talk about a lot. It's a subject that I think is most misunderstood in marketing, and it's the concept of customer theory. It's the Holy Grail in marketing. Let me begin by making some statements that probably some will find offensive. Marketing has lost its way. It's lost its way because we use it interchangeably with the word sales. We don't know the primary difference. We go to a university and get an MBA in marketing, and we still can't present a cohesive theory. Most of the time, if you go to take and get an education in marketing, it's sort of like this. Let's call this the universe of possible things to know. You get a dot here and a dot here and a dot here, and there's some electives, so you pick up these pieces, and somehow you put all this together, and this becomes what you walk away with from the university education. It's woefully inadequate. What instead you need to understand is how all these pieces connect into a comprehensive whole. We need to stack learning so that we can create depth. Now, if that were to be the case, if that were how we would approach the day, it might be easier to begin with the end. So let me ask you a question. What is the most important element in marketing? What is the place where we derive and set our compass from? What canvas do we always begin in if we're trying to think about marketing effectively? As you're asking or answering that question, I want to suggest to you that the answer lies on that infographic. And I'm going to take it and unpack it in reverse order today. Let's go back to the infographic for just a moment, and then we'll switch over to the deck and look at that case study. The key is in step 5. where it says integrate findings with customer theory. A customer theory is a predictive model of your customer's decision process. And there is no greater way for you to establish sustainable competitive advantage than for you to aggregate through testing and other methodologies a cohesive understanding of what matters to your customer and how they make choices. The holy grail in marketing is a customer theory. And we work backwards from that. Because if you get a copy of this book, which we haven't released except on our site, it'll be released next year everywhere else, Amazon and bookstores and so on, The Marketers Philosopher, what you're going to see is basically 30 years of research tied together in 40 reflections with an essential series of propositions that define a whole new way to think about your marketing paradigm. The essence of marketing is not the channel, it's not the budget, it's not the spend, it's not the brand. The essence of marketing is the message. And the essence of the message is the value proposition. And the essence of the value proposition is the exchange sum. That's the difference between perceived value and perceived cost. Now, there's only 4 components in marketing: a sender, a receiver, a message, and a means. All marketing can be understood through this. Once you take the paradigm that we present in this book and now think about how it applies to customer theory, what we're essentially saying is to get your message right, you have to begin where marketing always begins, in the mind of the prospective customer. Now, if what I've just said seems a bit disjointed, today is different. I'm presenting a mosaic. I want to tie multiple pieces together, and it'll all make more sense as we start to unpack the pieces. But let's begin by demonstrating what looks like an embarrassing research result. So there is the control, and here is the treatment. We'll shift over to the deck now. And as you look at the treatment, you're going to see that we employ a 4-step process for hypothesis development. And some of you have seen this, many of you have not. But if you were to cash in these 4 statements, what you're going to see is that by approaching them, we learned what we should be changing on the website. The problem with testing today is that we try ideas. That is a horrific way to invest your energy and your money. If you want to achieve M4L, if you want to get the most for the least, you've got to test a cohesive theory. The problem with multivariate testing is it just scrambles elements. Without a human being leveraging the power of intuition, we are still not anywhere near in the development of AI, despite all the hype you hear, of the machine capability of presenting meaningful hypotheses as it relates to a human being's decision process. This still requires you and I integrating with our tool sets so that we can put together a cohesive theory. In this case, we begin with an if statement. If we emphasize the process level value proposition. Now that is the primary difference. The if statement summarizes the big thing you're doing, the essence of your hypothesis. Now, if you don't know what process level value prop is, you need to tune into one of our other programs where we can teach you that, or we'll send you a link or ask us about that. But ultimately, there's 4 types of value propositions, and process level is related to your buttons and your forms and your downloads, things that move you forward in the process. So we shifted in the new treatment to a process level value proposition. We removed form fields in the first step. We added free trial copy, and we removed vague imagery. And you may have heard me teach this before. It's called the ARC principle. All you can ever do to a web page is add, remove, or change. So applying the ARC principle and defining it with the by statement, we're now telling you what physical changes we're making to the illusion of a page as we manipulate zeros and ones in order to create a new impact on the mind. An impact that's built around process level value proposition. And so we change the headline. And we use specific features and benefits that are utilized to express the core value. And then the page emphasizes free access. And then we ensure that the value is being communicated in subsequent steps in the page so that we're emphasizing over and over again the value of the process level value proposition. Now, as you think about that with me, you're able to do the 3rd step. Now, I want to pause for a minute. Can you switch me back to the diagram, Dan? And I want you to drill down on the page over there in number 2. Having observed customer behavior in the data sets using the discovery triad, which I'm going to come back and talk about in a moment, we develop a hypothesis framework that helps us build something that will actually add to our wisdom. The world is full of information, and it seems the more we get, the less wisdom we acquire. There is some sort of inverse and strange relationship. It feels like the more you overload me with facts and data, the less wisdom I tend to have. In fact, the less time I have to reflect because I'm always organizing. So what does that mean and how does that connect to us? I don't need some more data. I need wisdom. So I just use the data to purchase wisdom. And in this process, what we're doing is we're applying step 2 of the framework, and I'll show you how that works out in just a moment, and then I'm gonna come back and work through the framework, okay? So go ahead to the will statement. Now, back to the deck, we're able to focus on what we think will be the physical change in the world. What will physically change because we add and remove and change the pieces in the buy statement. Remove form fields in the first step, add free trial copy, and remove vague imagery. Now, we have summarized in a critical, and this is very important, the summary step, that if statement is very important. We have spelled out how we're accomplishing the intent of the if statement. And now we're adding a prediction to what's going to happen as a result, because we believe that this behavior change is related to something important in the mind. Which brings me to the most important and 4th step in hypotheses, which is the because statement. So, because the customer just wants to try the software for themselves as quickly as possible. Now, those 4 pieces combined give us a setup for learning. They put us on a stage where we can actually acquire valuable information about the customer's mind. Now, I'm looking at David Carrier online, who we're working with in a series of experiments. David, it's great to see you on here. I have this cool note from Andrew Hatfield. And Andrew, I'm going to tie all this in and show you the results of this test. But Andrew just told me that he's in from Brisbane, Australia, and this is the first time he can participate live. And so, Andrew, we're glad to have you on the program. He's in San Francisco right now. And there's a question from Victor that I'll try to get to later. But what I want you to do now is think about what happens when we run an experiment comparing the control and the treatment. What are we trying to accomplish with this new hypothesis? Now, be careful, because you may give me the wrong answer if you're not careful, but go ahead. Take your chat feature and tell me if we run a test using this carefully articulated hypothesis, control against the treatment, I'll show you the 2 side by side. Tell me, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the most important thing that can happen when this test begins? All right, Andrew, we're glad to have you. I'm watching these pieces coming in, all right? So talk to me. What do you think is the most... We get more leads, Dave said. Very important, all right? What else? Anybody else have a thought on this page? What happens? What is the desired outcome of this test? Clicks on get free access, someone has said. Any other thoughts? Reducing customer confusion, says Moose. All right, so those are all people in the audience talking. And I want to bring you back to the point I'm trying to make. The essence of marketing is the message. The essence of the message is the value proposition. And in order to field a proper value proposition, I've got to understand the mind. I want to gently argue with you for a moment. I want to suggest to you that the most important thing that can happen in this test is that we learn whether or not our hypothesis, in particular the idea that a process level value proposition will produce more leads, will produce the desired behavior. The most important thing that can happen in this test is that we learn whether or not that's the key factor. You say, well, what about a lift? Isn't that what we're really after? Aren't you confusing the means with the end? No, I'm not. Because the end is a deep understanding of the customer. The end is customer wisdom. With that, I can get this lift and another lift and another lift. I can change products. I can transform the business. The value proposition is the compass. But to set your compass right, true north is in the mind of the prospect. So what happens on this test? Well, it's a bit deceptive. We run the test and we get what? A 24.5% drop. Now, in most marketing departments, that's a moment that you don't look forward to. It's a moment when you tell your boss, well, we ran the test, but we didn't get a lift. That's our third one in a row without a lift. But we think the next one's going to be good. You're slightly embarrassed. You're trying to explain yourself. You've got to justify the budget, the spend, the dev resources, and all the work that was done. David Carrier has a test running right now. I don't know whether it's going to produce a lift or not. I suspect it will. But I already know what I want to test second and third. And it's more important to acquire the wisdom as fast as possible so we can get the most money in the shortest period of time. So let's talk about that for a second as I look at this result. Now, I could, for the sake of entertaining you, talk about how our brilliant scientists grew conversion negatively by 24.5%. And it's funny, but the truth is this was a good test with a good outcome that produced the real result I needed to understand, the real result we needed to understand. And what I'm going to share with you is how we leverage that. But look up in the corner. Do you see that little triad? I'm going to come back to that triad. I'm going to show you how by spinning that triad around, we figured out what to test next. And so we think about this in a new way. Here's the same company, but here's what we do that's different. New test protocol, 1825. Now, we're going to test a different approach. In fact, I'm going to skip through this piece. You've seen that one before, and I'm going to come back to this one. All right, so remember that? So here's what we do next. We take a different part of the site with less traffic, but the same traffic profile so that we can run a good sound experiment without risking too much financial downside. We don't want them to lose 24%, on their home page. But now we use this other page that had the same approach and as the home page, and we begin to apply the discovery triad, which I'm going to come back to design a new test. We use one of their SEO pages. It's offering the same product as the home page, but dealt with a smaller subset, and we can test here without negative consequences. So we now create this page. It's not a beautiful page. It's not the best page. It's not the page we're running now. But it is employing that unique approach to hypothesis development that we embed in our testing system. And now I want you to notice the difference. It says if we emphasize the product level value proposition. Now hold on a second. That's a code. We use two P words, product and process, but it's a gigantic difference in approach. Here's what we're not doing. We're not sitting around a room looking at the results of that and saying, gosh, I don't know what happened. Do you know what happened? And then arguing about it. And then finally the boss coming in and saying, let's try this. We're not generating some ideas. We're not thinking, I think the imagery was off, or I think if we just change this word, or I think, I ran a test 6 years ago and here's what I discovered. All that's valuable as preliminary conversation, but it doesn't tie together a cohesive understanding that you can test and glean wisdom with. And so we apply that four-part hypothesis again, if we emphasize the product level. And product level value proposition means instead of talking about what you're going to get with a free trial and the download, that's the process, we're going to actually talk about the product, not the company, the product, not the prospect type, other segments, but the product. That's our approach. That's what we're testing. So by adding a product value copy and imagery, so what are we going to do? All we did is added product value copy and we added product value imagery. That's the main change we made to this page. We'll come back to it side by side in a moment. Here's the headline difference. It focuses on the product, and specific features and benefits are utilized to express the value, to codify it. And now we expect, again, what we want to see is a behavior change, an increase in leads. But we want to know why the behavior change, or this whole thing is just a crapshoot. The idea here is that customers don't, what we said in the original test, it's not that they just want to try it, but they want to know more about the product before they sign up to try it. See the difference in the sequence of thought? See the difference in the approach? See what's at stake here with this experiment. If we get this right, we learn something that has transferable power. So go back to the diagram if you would, Dan. And And so all I'm walking through is the real life application of this wall chart that I want to give you. And essentially what it's doing is we're observing the results from the previous test using the discovery triad, which I've taught on in the past. I'll bring it back into this conversation in a few minutes. Then we're forming a hypothesis. Then we're testing the hypotheses. And then we're integrating the findings with our customer theory. And here's what we're going to learn. And by the way, this is a question you should ask before you run every test. What do I learn if I don't see a conversion lift? What do I learn if I do see a conversion lift? If you can't answer that question, you're not ready to push the button and go yet. Okay? So, back to the pieces. Now I have 2 pages, and I want to test my audience. If you're tracking with me, tell me, what do I learn if B wins? If you've been following me, you're going to be able to answer that in a single short sentence. Do your best. I'm watching the chat features, and I know it takes a moment for you to get your responses in. What do I learn if B defeats A? Anybody have an idea? Yakov asked, while you're answering, let me answer Yakov's question. Why not test all 4 types of value propositions in parallel? Because to test all 4, Yakov, you have to, we would need to use 4 specific treatments, and that would create a much higher number of actions to be measured. We were able to eliminate 2 of those by looking at previous data, and we were able to shorten the test time by keeping our treatments down to just the control and a B version. And so we got to an answer faster. Sometimes I would run all 4, and I've done that. I've got an example in this deck where I did that, but right now, that's what the idea is. All right. Product is more important to customer than company. So Jesus said product is more important so that's almost it. Remember, in the first test, we were testing process level value prop. Many times we put a download on the page, but we don't talk about it in such a way as to make it compelling. We wonder why our conversion rate is low. Many times, focusing one objective. We talked about this when I taught the 21 elements, the 21 psychological elements of page design. The objective. 70% of your objective needs to be focused on one thing. So our strategy here was, should we focus on the download? David, should we focus on the workshops? Going back to your situation, should we focus on one of the other elements in your offering, or focus primarily on the overall value of the organization? Those questions have huge impacts on results. If B wins, we'll understand that product level value proposition may be more powerful to this audience, more impactful, drive more of the right behavior than process level value prop. Now, you could come to me and you could say, I'm a master in marketing, and I would be grateful to meet you, but I still wouldn't trust your judgment as to which one of those is going to be the answer, because the only person who really knows is the person I'm serving, and you're not the person I'm serving. Not when I'm in the role described for this experiment. I'm serving the customer. And if I serve the customer well, I will serve the company, the business, well also. If I serve the customer poorly, I will serve the business poorly. I've got to figure out how to serve the customer better than they're currently being served. And right now, they weren't being served well enough because they couldn't get the information they need to make a good decision. This product has a strong value proposition. And all they needed to do was get that decision right. So let's go full screen for a moment. All right. And what you're looking at is the 2 side by side. And I'm going to share with you the difference. Here it is. B produces a 548% relative increase. Did you hear me? Are you registering that? That's science. That's validated. That's been certified. That's no exaggeration. Do not trust most of the percentages you see on the internet. Every time I get into those experiments and tests, then there's so much hype, so much nonsense, such poor science, such exaggeration, but that's a real number. And step level click-through went up by, look at that number, 1,312%. You said, you must have made a lot of money. No, we didn't. We got something better than money. See, we could have got some money and said, wow, this is awesome. But since that was a narrow part of the funnel where there wasn't as many people coming, let's on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to make a ratio. Let's say that has a 2 in terms of impact on revenue. Now, if you think about it in that way, even a smaller percentage on a fatter pipe where there's more people going could produce more net revenue. So what is the value of 548%? I'll tell you the value. It indicates there's a big, powerful impact on the mind when we focus on product level value proposition. And that, my friend, is the difference between dollars and something the Greeks would say is, and I'm gonna write it like this, synesis, and it means right seeing. For the first time, we're seeing into the customer's mind, and in doing so, we have something more valuable than the immediate dollars. We have wisdom, and that wisdom can be translated into dollars, and that, my friend, is what happens when you build a customer theory. Right now, this is just one step in a customer theory. Imagine this is just like one lever in the mind that we're learning to pull. Okay, but I want all those levers pulled properly, and if we can get them pulled right, and we pull each one, we're going to be able to drive enormous value. We need each one, and we need to stack our learnings. That's where this graphic comes that I want to teach and help you learn, but let me just pause there for a second. So here's how customer theory pays off. We learned one thing. It's funny, just one important thing. I'd like to learn 100 more, but the one gives me an advantage over the competition already. So, look what we did. We went back to the home page. Remember that? We lost 24%. What did we do with that 24%? We laid a 548% concept. Now that's the next win, but all we learned was something about what matters to the customer, and we applied it back to the home page. What did that do for us? 90%. Now listen to me. That's 90% on the big fat pipe. The revenue impact for that is almost double. Let's call the value of that wisdom, let's call it an 8 compared to a 2 when we think about its multiplier impact on top line revenue. Marketer, if you listen to me, by the way, marketing is phenomenal. Don't buy into the negative connotation of marketing. Understand that what you're dealing with is the essence of human nature, and it's the most fascinating way you can spend your life. You're learning about yourself, and you're learning about everyone around you when you study this type of thing. And what I want you to see right now is that you need to realign your entire set of objectives for your business. You need to focus on acquiring over the next 12, 24 months deep customer wisdom. And then you can take that customer wisdom and cash it in just as sure as you can, chips at a casino. You cash in those chips, and they translate into dollars. And had we set this experiment up wrong, we could have been bragging about a 548% lift with a multiplier impact of 2. Now, just to be clear, I'm making up the 2 and I'm making up the 8 to create a ratio differential in your mind. I haven't done any math to actually arrive at those numbers, but the point is the same. 548% lift would have made everybody feel good, but it would only put a little money on the books. Instead, we designed the experiment to teach us something, not just to get a lift. And by doing that, we achieved an 8-type impact, and we had a huge impact on the revenue. And this company went public. So I want to back up now because I want to teach how this diagram all comes together and help you really start to see the pieces. What I want to be careful of is I have a mixed audience, people that are new. A lot of people are tuning into the 21 psychological elements. It's growing fast. I'm grateful. It's a good time for me to say, do a couple of things for us if you would. Like this right now if you can, because by doing so, we'll get higher search rankings and get more people to watch. And share with a friend. I was talking to a group on the phone yesterday. I was so impressed. The CEO put his marketing team together, and they watched the 3 of these last YouTube lives, all on the 21 psychological elements with a download, 3 times as a team, each one, 3 times. Then extracted it and applied it. That's the point here. I don't want to cram things into your head. I want to change the way you see. And then I want to change your results. And I want to build a meaningful relationship with you because we're studying things together and helping each other learn. And by the way, I'm not the only person here with answers. You're learning everyday things that can make us better and can help this community. And what we're going to do as sure as you're here is we're going to build a remarkable community. Now, if you're not familiar with this, we already have nearly 2 million people a year in our community visiting our site and then our social media and our lists. But I'm building a much more intense community focused around understanding the Holy Grail, metanoia. And to do that, here's what's going on, and I'm going to shift to the diagram. We did something weird years ago. We ran a series of experiments in something called experimental philosophy, which no one even knew about back then. Now it's a popular thing. I'm really not a scientist, but we get accused of that. But we ran experimental philosophy, and on the piece of that, what we discovered was the next big plank is psychology. If you get the philosophy of marketing right, you can stack the psychology on top of it. And when you get that right, you can put the art into marketing. The true art, which is phenomenal. It's these 3 layers that I want to work with you on. I want to get the philosophy right, I want to get the psychology right, and then I want to do art together. And that's the only kind of people I'm trying to appeal to on YouTube Live. This isn't for everybody. This is for people who want to think deeply about their work and their life, who want to have meaningful work and meaningful relationships. All right, now, with that in mind, I want to go back to the diagram, and I want to begin to teach. So, I'm going to work you through this, and we're going to link you to resources, but I want to make a suggestion for everybody that's taking the time to hang out with us. This is how you should be focusing your entire organization for the next 12 months. Everything should be about step 5. Building this predictive model. If I were to go back in our deck, I'll just show you. The CEO and I of this company are really good friends. In step 5, I'll show you how this works with one more really short example. But I love this example, and I love this guy. His name is Nainan Chacko. He was the CEO of PR Newswire, did the merger with Cision, very successful, very smart, took over TLG. He has 50,000 travel agents working for him now. And I think they drive somewhere between 40 and 50 billion with a B dollars in travel. We started a new research project together called Travel Marketing Science, where we studied the industry. But before we did that, and the reason we did that was because the success we had here with PR Newswire. And what I want you to see is only one moment of this. Some of you have seen this, but I'm going back to the chart. I just want you to see when I mentioned aim for this with your marketing efforts. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. We did not know when we began testing value proposition whether PR Newswire is the highest authority in the industry, whether PR Newswire has the fact that it's the best network, or the fact that it has the best customer service. All of those are facts. It invented the industry 60 years ago. It was the market leader. But you can imagine that the digital age hurt it the same way it hurt the newspaper business. And so they had to re-encapsulate their messaging. Because what is the essence of marketing, everyone? I'm imagining I hear you answering me now. The essence of marketing is the message. And the essence of the message is the value proposition. In fact, here's what you're going to see in my approach. We just finished 5 experiments in Facebook. I'll show those to you. We'll put them in another program. But Facebook itself will be replaced someday by something better. But what we're learning about the mind will be true 1,000 years from now and was true 1,000 years ago. And we have a principle here in our lab. We only study what will matter 1,000 years from now. This is the essence of how human beings select, choose, decide, and thus survive, thrive, or not. Getting this wrong can have a huge impact. This question, see the screen? This question. Which one of these will produce the highest response rate? And you'll notice we tested a page that was identical except for the message at the top of the page, and each one of these messages stressed a result. Now, if you were to come in here and say, oh, I know it's this, I'd be pleased with your confidence, but I'd question your judgment because I wouldn't know. And maybe you know more than I do. That's very possible. I'm not saying that rhetorically. That's really possible. But here's what I know most of all. I know how to get an answer. And I don't trust my own answer until I've verified it by getting inside the mind of the customer. And so following the methodology we're teaching, we tested all 3 of these. And the one that I didn't think would win won. The one that I thought was just a threshold. But the one that outpulled everything on a vast audience of millions is 3, number 21%. And by the way, we found that the other message resonated with certain segments better than the stochastic largest sample size. So There was value in all of those messages, but the one that resonated and should have been on the home page was T3. Now, why is that important? Because once you know that, you know all sorts of things. You don't know one thing, you know many things. And a wise man learns many things by learning one thing really well. So let's go back to the graphic. And by the way, Dan often does broadcasts, interviews, his background's radio. It's really fun having him be engineering today because I like ordering him around and seeing him make faces at me. Do you guys know Dan? Because he's not in here a lot, but he oversees all content. And he's been with me for about 150 years. I think we met in the Civil War. Come up here, Dan, and just for a second, and then I'll shift down. I just want you to see Dan, because he's always talking to you. This is Dan. He's dressed up for you today. You'll notice that he looks taller than me, but in real life he's not. I'm much taller. He has to bend down to me so I don't look so bad. Anyway, this is Dan Burstein, and he's helping us today. You'll see his name on lots of things. He's brilliant at marketing. He knows everybody in the industry, and he oversees all. He's like a writing machine. He replaced like a team of 30. Anyway, thanks, Dan. So all that being said, I want to go back over to here and say what you should be doing this year is saying, I'm going to figure out my customer, and I'm going to figure out the 3 to 5 most important things about their mind that will change my business going forward, that will transform results and even help me when I think about products. This is just as true for product development as it is for web development. Now let's go from 5 backwards. So what do you have when you have a customer theory? What do you really have? What you have is an understanding of which message resonates most and provokes the most action, i.e., it produces a strong conclusion followed by the right yeses in a decision that leads to the action you're after. And that may be things like this. What matters most to my audience? So I'm picking on David because he's become my new friend. We met through YouTube Live, but we've spent a lot of time together. He's flown here, we've talked. Understanding in this largest stochastic sample size of David's audience, check out his business. It's carrierlaw.com. It's cool business. Real value proposition. I love what he's doing to help people. And my point is, David needs to know, first of all, about these people, what matters most to them when they come to you. He needs to also know, what are they most afraid of? He needs to know what negative experiences might be blurring their perception of value or of cost, i.e. risk. He needs to know what word combinations, i.e. articulation of our value proposition, produces the highest and most positive response set. When he starts to build this composite, when he can get inside the mind of the customer, once he gets that composite, he's in a place to win the battle here. And this is where it has to be won. So how is David going to get that information? Well, he can get it by talking to people. He can use that in such a way as to find out answers. But a lot of times when you ask people about themselves, they don't even know the answer themselves. We're terrible at evaluating ourselves. The best way to understand what matters to someone is to follow their tracks backwards. So I'm in Florida, so imagine this is the beach and this is a set of tracks on the beach. When I follow these tracks backwards, I'm basically following the behavioral traces into the ontology of the person, into the essence of their being. I'm using doing to parse being. And so if you'll notice back to the diagram, what's going on is go by step 5. I'm working backwards through, look, 4. I'm not testing conversion ideas. I'm not testing the boss's best thinking. I am not testing Flint's ideas. I'm testing a hypothesis developed by our team through something we call HD, hypothesis development, in such a way as to learn something very clear and very meaningful. When marketing does this, sales becomes redundant. And I didn't say that. Peter Drucker did. He knew more about marketing probably after 10 minutes of thought than many people do after 10 years of work. He was one of the greatest business philosophers I think that the world has ever seen. And my point for you is this: go backwards from their actions into their essence. Did you hear that? From actions backwards to essence. So, David, I've been thinking about the tone of your copy, the headline, the key pieces that you built into this latest test. And I'm already asking, what do I learn based on performance in, if it goes up, if it goes down, and what happens next? And when we do this, we do it through a discipline. I'll show you something because I've never shown this, I don't think online here before, but Dan, switch me to the protocol. So how do you run these tests? You can use a testing tool, but the art here is not running a test, it's getting the customer psychology right. Testing is actually harder than most people think and has to be done with good science, and it's being done poorly in a lot of places, but there's lots of testing tools, and I'm not trying to be in that business. You're looking at a testing system that we built and patented in 2006 that we use to run 20,000 of our own treatment experiments and to extend our knowledge. I've spent $138 million building this. I'm not selling it right now, by the way. But I want you to, Dan, pick a test. The goal of this is to study and maintain, move to screenshots, Dan, just for a second. We store the screenshots in here, and this is a process that you can implement inside your business that produces the customer theory. And if you go to validity, go to the validity tab, Dan, just click on validity. It also protects you against making poor judgments about your customer by not recognizing validity threats that aren't even showing up in your testing tools. Now, if you're on here and say, well, I don't have that, and what is the point of showing me this? You're just frustrating me. What I want you to see is that you don't need the tool, you need the method. The tool just automates it for us. I can teach you the method. Stay tuned to these broadcasts. Take some of our training. Get the book. But you can learn this and embed it in your business. We may one day release that to everybody, but we haven't because we're a research institute. We're not trying to compete with software companies. But I have watched for 10 years hoping they'd plug the hole, and so far they haven't. All they're doing is showing us how to test. They're not teaching us what to test, and that's the missing element. So let's go back to the diagram. So what I'm suggesting for you is if you don't have a testing program today, you need one, and you've got to start getting one right away, and it's inexpensive, but you've got to start testing because it's the behavioral tests that are going to yield the customer insights. So back to the diagram, if you will, Cliff or someone. So 5 follows from 4, and 4 is testing that hypothesis with a control and treatment. Now here's a point for all of you that have thought about testing before. You know one of the biggest, stupidest things anyone ever said about testing when it comes to a business environment? You can only change one variable at a time. Even the people that say that contradict themselves because they change the button. But really, how many variables are there in a button? There's the color, there's the shape, there's the words, there's the drop shadow or not, i.e. the dimensionality of it. I can list a whole sort of things. And when they change a button, they're already changing a cluster of variables. In 2006, we patented variable clusters. The idea here is you don't test one variable, you test one hypothesis consisting of a set of cohesive variables. Just knowing that can transform your test results. You can download this chart, by the way. We'll give you a link to it so that you can look at it and study it. But I want you to understand the importance of that and then go back to what I taught about the 21 psychological elements and realize that's how you're going to figure out your control and your treatment. And I'm going to move back into step 3. So what is step 3? Apply the hypothesis to build your treatment. We don't need to spend a lot of time there, but what you want to do is make sure that you don't hire a designer or an agency and get some great creative ideas. That's the road to destruction. I have seen so many sites launched and conversion goes down. Worse, it goes down and people don't even know it. It's bad enough when they realize it. But the reality is you should be fielding a cohesive hypothesis and not some set of trendy ideas, cool design pieces. You're not trying to win an award, you're trying to win a customer. Let me bring you back to 2. I've been teaching that in this session, but the second most important thing here is to get that hypothesis right so that it yields the learning. And I have other places where I teach that. I'm just going to stop there and take you back to the step 1, observe customer behavior. Now, step 1 involves a triad that asks 3 questions. Its premise is this: to get to how, you're going to have to go deeper. So if you have a boss that says, how can I get more leads? How can I get more sales? How can I get more subscriptions? That's your how question. Well, you're going to have to answer that with a hypothesis. You don't know the answer till you test it. But the way to build your hypothesis is to ask two other more important questions. Number one, what does the data tell us about existing behavior? You've got to use that. That's the observation phase. Take me back to the diagram, if you would, for just a second. And what you're going to see is, do you see the customer attributes, that whole series of bullets under observed customer behavior? I am watching your behavior to determine something about your essence. I am watching your actions to understand your essence. I am looking at your ethos and at your practice to understand your ontology. You don't need a 50-cent philosophy word. You just need a deep understanding that I want to know who you are so I can serve you better. But to do that, I got to ask another question, even more profound than this. In order of importance, I would say this is the number 2 important question. I'd say this is the number 3 and the easiest one to answer when you get the number 1 right. And this is number 1 over here. This is the one that unlocks the keys to the kingdom. Why are people behaving this way? When you can figure out the why piece, when you get a sense of it might be because of this, like why are they abandoning the second step of my cart? Why are more people not clicking through from my home page? Why, whatever that behavior is, it will lead you to engage the great gift of your mind, the great gift that is so far not even near duplication by all the rhetoric and the scientists and the AI investments in the billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. No one has been able to create a machine that can do what you do with this mysterious capability, but somehow you can pull together at an intuitive level vast amounts of information, detect patterns, derive implications, and see answers long before there's a rational trail that points to that answer, long before you can spell it out step by step. Go full screen if you would, Cliff. So, for that to happen, you need to observe a lot, and then you need your mind work, and you need to focus your mind with the right questions, and the how, what, why pattern gets you to think about a potential answer that leads to, back to the diagram, a hypothesis. H. And with that hypothesis, as outlined in step 2, you build your treatments. Step 3, then you test them. Step 4, and then you take the learnings and build out a customer theory. I'll challenge you. I dare you. Take the next 12 months and say to yourself, I'm going to end these 12 months knowing more about my competition, twice as much as I've ever, more about my customers, twice as much as I've ever known about my customers, and way more than my competition knows. Listen to me. Forget your competition. You'll see a pattern. I've talked about it for years. The great businesses are not being run by people who are winners. They're being run by people who are builders. Winners get their position by crushing somebody else, and that's generally how they got promoted to their CMO role. They beat people in their company, or their CEO role. They beat other contenders. Then they get in the job and they want to beat somebody, so they look around for a competitor and they try to beat them. Terrible mindset, doesn't produce value, it just produces conflict. I'm not saying ignore the competition, I'm just telling you this. Your energy should be on knowing the customer. If you know the customer better than you know the competitor, you won't have to worry about the competitor very much. Take 80% of the energy you spend worried about competitors and put it on the customer. Put 20% on the competition. And this year will be different for you. So my challenge is get this diagram, put it on your wall. Figure out how to organize your team around it and reach out to us. And we'll help you. We'll put you in an intensive, or we'll give you training, or we'll tie you up with, we'll give you new free resources that we've developed. I want to change how people think. I measure success by the impact we have on people like you. I know who I'm supposed to serve, and I don't want to waste my life doing anything else. And I want to help you be better at what you do. And I'm just grateful that you give me energy and attention and care enough to be on these programs. Now, I see a question from Yakov. I'm about to end, but he's asked a question, so I'm going to look at this. What about if you start from the beginning rather than fixing what you have? How does it all apply? Yakov, it begins by doing the kind of research that starts, let's suppose you're getting ready to write a book. The biggest mistake an author makes is to sit down and start planning the book without deeply reflecting on who he's trying to serve with that book. If he gets the critic in his mind, he'll probably produce the wrong book. If he gets the If he gets the industry expert in his mind, he's probably going to produce the wrong book. I need a clear picture of who I'm writing for. That's what happened when we wrote this. And I didn't write it for everybody. And I said to the publisher when they wanted to release this 4 years ago and we wouldn't let them. I said, I don't care how many people read it. I just care if the right person reads it and has the right result. It brought clarity to me. Now, I say that to you because it's the same thing when you start the site. Always start with who. So Yaakov, start with what you already can discern about that customer and then design the system to constantly add information. Remember, your first website is just a set of hypotheses that needs to be quickly iterated into the most effective, highest performing version of your message. You will always start with a hypothesis, but the hypotheses should be built around, first of all, the customer, and then the message, and then the value proposition. Hope that answers your question. Dave, can I ask you guys this? Because I have tied together many things I've been teaching, and part of that bothers me. Part of it bothers me because I want to constantly be taking you into new territory, but we missed a whole YouTube live session where I taught some of this. We were not able to put it on YouTube because of technical issues with the sound, and so I'm making up for that, but also trying to produce this graphic so that you can tie everything I've been teaching for the last 3 months together in a single picture, and then you can take that picture and tie it with those 21 psychological elements, and you've really got the beginning of a cohesive sort of approach. Am I doing the right thing? Give me some feedback right now, and let me know if you found today helpful so that I can plan what I'm going to do next week. And also, if you like these graphics, they're a lot of work. Is Megan in here? No. Megan designed this for us, one of our designers. She spent hours, many hours getting it right, tying it together, trying to communicate more effectively. And I need to know that you like that. To me, it's just super important that we arm you with a single picture, not just a whole bunch of slides. I think PowerPoint's one of the worst things that's ever happened to learning. We take everything apart, but we don't know how to put it back together, and we don't have a big enough screen to do so. I believe in the power of big visuals. Last thing I'm going to do, I got a page right here from D2IQ Solutions. Pull it up, Brian. This is the guy from Australia, and he said, I'd love if you'd review my page. So he's in San Francisco today, and we are looking at his page. Team, I have probably not 5 minutes, but they're going to be 5 dense, well-spent minutes. Don't run away yet. Stay with me. Let's help one of the members of our community, Andrew. Let's help you, and also let's learn, and then finally, let's apply what we've been learning. So somebody, tell me, what are the 3 things the top of this page has to do? Real quick, say it really fast. So Dave Carey said there's no good headline. He's right. It's not a headline that you have right there. All right, 3 things, 3 questions. What are the 3 questions? Where am I? That's not crystal clear. There's too much white space. What can I do here? That's not clear at all. Why should I do it? That's not even mentioned. So in that first piece, we're missing the most important information payload that needs to be delivered in the first 7 seconds of that potential relationship. Imagine, Andrew, and I hope I can be really direct because I want to help you. I'm not trying to be harsh, but I'm thinking like a customer. Imagine that you and I don't know each other. And today we meet in San Francisco, and for some reason I want to have a relationship, a friendship, let's say, but I talk to you the way the top of this web page is saying. Well, I start by saying a word that doesn't make any sense, convoy. I don't know what that word is. If I walk up to you and say some word that makes no sense, we're not off to a good start. Then I say a packaged set of integrated operational services for Kubernetes so you can get up and running quickly and easily. Now you haven't said a sentence, by the way. That looks like a sentence because it's a lot of words. But when you have a sentence that looks like a lot of words, but it's not a sentence, you really got a problem. Because it has no subject. It has no subject predicate form. Thus, go full screen on that page if you would, Cliff. It has no subject predicate form, so you don't have a meaningful message being communicated, and then we have another problem. All right, so Andrew, imagine that I'm meeting you. I start out with a word that may be nonsensical to you, but maybe your prospects know this, but I don't. And then I say something, but it's not a complete sentence. Let's suppose I walk up to you and say, sunny with a 20% chance of rain and damp outside. If I walk up to you and speak that way, there's no way for us to establish a connector. which is rapport building and which is essential to the online relationship. That's bad enough. But having so poorly started, am I ready to ask you to do anything at this point? So smart people on chat, tell me, what's missing with the call to action? What's wrong with it? Well, the list is long. So let me help you. I see the answers coming in. If I walk up to you today, say in the hotel lobby, use a nonsensical word, make a statement like I did about the weather that isn't even a complete sentence, and then say, dinner tonight? You're going to look at me like, are you crazy? Because I'm asking too much too soon. I don't know enough to even begin to answer. So here I am, request free trial. Why the hell would I want a free trial? I don't even know what it is, and I know what happens when I click that button. So that button has a problem that I hope everybody looking here will not only try to help Andrew, but you'll be looking at your own site and saying, is there any version of this that I'm doing? Because essentially, you've all learned this before, there's a fulcrum here with this ask. Perceived value, perceived cost. Now, if you want to get a lot of conversions, perceived value needs to tilt this fulcrum down like my dotted line so that it's like this way, and there's a lot of perceived value. But what happens here is there's no value. So go back to the page. There's no value. I don't know what that really means. And with zero value, you start hitting me with cost. You want me to do something. You want me to click. You want me to take a risk. I now have two types of psychological resistance forming inside of me. Two types, psychological resistance actually and psychological concern. Resistance is like built around, so why are you asking me this so soon? What is this? What happens when I click on the free trial? Are you going to take me to, is this going to email me one? Does it take me to an automatic download? Do you require a credit card? I don't know what's going to happen next when I respond. And if you were to say to me in that hotel lobby, follow me to dinner, I'd be thinking, am I about to get robbed? Like what? Who is this guy? Why is he asking me for this? What's he really up to? That's what's being created with that button. And then that's not even getting over the anxiety in its full extent. So there's tons of friction and anxiety. What you really have is this side weighs way more than this side. And so what you're seeing is the only people converting are people that already know about you or are highly motivated. Back to the page. What is the answer? When I said, am I in the right place? What can I do here and why should I do it? D2IQ. What is that really? I don't know. It doesn't tell me anything. It could be, let's take that name. You could put that on a piece of software. You could put that on something for educators. You could put that on a certification class. You could put that on an app. When you got an interchangeable name, you already have a problem. And so I don't know right now if you sell sailboats, or software for sailboats, or software for racing. So I could spend more time on the page, but I want you to know that it really doesn't matter what comes after this, because most people are never going to get there. So this is not a page to optimize. You need to go back and start over. You need to take that 21 psychological elements that we've been teaching for the last 3 weeks and apply them and think with a fresh canvas. And I'll tell you what, if you do that, we'll figure out a way to try to help you or something. Just, I want to see you succeed. Andrew, I hope I haven't upset you. I am out of time, but I wanted to try and help you. And I want to thank everybody who has joined us again. And I appreciate your comments and your feedback. And I shall be back next week with more. Thank you.